Hello, welcome to Luke429. I am Michael, your host. This is episode number 2. And we're going to talk about the RFRA, Religious Freedom Restoration Act. When I first started this, or had in mind doing this show, I never thought this would be my first episode. I had all sorts of other stuff. But this is what's dominating the headlines today. This is what has captured public attention for the past week. And people have gone crazy. And people are saying all sorts of things and perpetuating all sorts of myths and even lies. And they don't know why. They don't know why. They think things, but they're not sure why they think them. They're regurgitating sound bites. They're regurgitating headlines. They're repeating popular opinion, and they don't know why. It doesn't always make sense. And so that's what we want to talk about. We're not going to talk about the law itself. If you want to know about the law itself, Google it. It's been broken down every which way from Sunday. Both sides, the right and the left, there's every opinion out there on it. You can look that up. Instead, we want to talk about the social response to the law. What are people saying? Why have so many people gone crazy over this law? Why is my Facebook exploding with all of this anger? Name calling. It's just going nuts. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you why. Again, going back to the very first episode, it's about pop culture. It's pop culture trickling down into our everyday lives and influencing the way we think, even though we don't know why we think that. It's groupthink. It's mob mentality. It's people regurgitating things. When this law first came about, here's how I found out about it. It's from this article right here. This comes from Salon. It says Indiana is poised to legalize anti-LGBT discrimination. Is that true? Is that really what Indiana was poised to do? To discriminate against people? Let's break away from the social response just for a second. I don't claim to speak for all Christians, but I do think most Christians are probably thinking the same way I am. No one is looking for a reason to discriminate. No one's saying, how can I kick people out of my business? What's the best way to not serve them? What's the best way that I can just rile people up and say, get out of there? You know, people were talking about, when this law came about, talking about businesses hanging signs outside saying they weren't going to serve homosexuals. That was not going to happen. That was never going to happen. Nobody in their right mind would do that. See, if I was running a business and you came into my business and you were attracted to the same sex, what am I going to do about that? Doesn't matter. I really don't care. I mean, I do care. I care for the, salvation of your soul. But as far as it's my business, doesn't matter. You can be attracted to an animal. You can be attracted to a tree. You can be attracted to a car. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter because it's still in your head. It's not being translated into action. It's not something that is now in action that you're coming in there and telling me that I must partake in. That's the problem Christians have. It's not about people being homosexual. And this is why the portrayal of what's going on right now is so wrong in the media. Because everyone always goes back to 1960s Southern racial segregation. Why are these bad comparisons? This is apples to oranges. Why? Because if a black man walks into my shop, what do I know about him? He's black and he's a man. Those are inherent to him. Nothing he can do about that. It is who he is. And I'm not going to discriminate based on who he is. Now, if a homosexual walks in and they make the case that I was born this way, it is inherent to me, guess what? That is who he is, and I'm not going to discriminate on that. What I'm going to get mad about, what I'm going to start saying, I'm not going to agree with that, I'm not going to go along with that, I'm not going to do that. It's not about who you are. It's about what you do. That's the difference. It's not about who you are. It's about what you do. When you want to get married, and I have a biblical view that marriage is between a man and a woman, that comes from Scripture, and I hold that very closely. It's not about who you are. It's about what you're doing. And what you're doing is violating that Scripture, something that I hold very close to me. No one's talking about this in the media. Instead, we get headlines that were poised to discriminate. Discriminate. No, we're not. No one wants to discriminate because you're a homosexual. What we want to do is not participate in what we see as sin. Big difference. Getting back to social response. We're not talking about that difference, are we? That is being hidden. That is being hidden purposefully. Let's look at some other headlines that came after the law was passed. There's this one. Understanding why Indiana's RFRA clears the way to discriminate against LGBT Americans. Did it really clear the way to discriminate? As backlash against Indiana's license to discriminate grows, damage control is failing. This is called a license to discriminate over and over and over again. It was originally passed in order to protect, but instead they flipped it around and it became an attack. It became a license to discriminate. Remember, nobody wants to go out and discriminate. Nobody's thinking, how can I best discriminate? But that's how it's being pitched in the media. All of these headlines, license to discriminate, as if people are now saying, all right, now I get to go out and discriminate against people. All right, finally I get to kick people out. No, it's ridiculous. Here's another one from Huffington Post. Mike Pence dodges questions on anti-gay discrimination in Indiana. Not even a question about it. It's just anti-gay discrimination, and it's happening in Indiana. That's a foregone conclusion in this article. The Washington Post, they just asked the question, license to discriminate? Notice how it keeps being put in your mind over and over and over and over again. License to discriminate. It's discrimination. It's discrimination. The Advocate says Governor Mike Pence just gave Indiana a license to discriminate. Over and over and over. And this is never how this law came about. Whether or not you agree with the law and the wording of the law, it was never a license to discriminate. It was never meant to be that way. It was never written that way. It was supposed to be protection for religious people. Protection so that they do not have to deal with this government coming in and trampling upon their religious freedoms. But instead, it immediately got switched around. Instead of focusing on protecting them and their conscience, all the headlines pointed in the opposite direction. They did a 180 and started calling it a license to discriminate. So rather than Christians being on the defensive, trying to protect themselves, now they're on the attack and going to discriminate. All based on public perception. All because the media wrote headlines stating it that way. And people bought into it. People started believing that this law licenses discrimination. Right after it was passed, and people just started going off, just frothing at the mouth, calling for Pence's head on a stake, telling Mike Pence they hoped he burned in hell. Just a couple days later, I started seeing people apologizing for that because, oh, I guess I didn't understand it to begin with. They started screaming about it. They started pitching a fit. They started saying some pretty horrible things about something they admit they didn't completely understand. Now that more of the facts have come out, it's very slowly calming down, but it's still just going nuts. And the reason is because of pop culture. The reason is because this idea, homosexuality has been around forever. It's always been an issue. It's always been here. It's always been debated through all sorts of cultures, all different cultures and throughout history. But it's really come to a head here in America because of homosexual marriage. And what is happening is that the script is getting flipped. And rather than simply allowing these unions or tolerating it or any of that stuff that gets pitched, it's actually turning around against Christians, and it's saying you must accept our way of life or you don't get to play ball. You don't get to do business here. That's the problem. Now, there's going to be some on the left, and there's going to be some on the right who are perhaps thinking and using their brains and saying, you know what, that's not what this is all about. It has nothing to do with that. My point is the majority of people who aren't thinking, that is what they're saying. That is what they're saying. The majority of people who hear the sound bites and read the articles and are jumping on the bandwagon are saying, how dare these Christians inflicting their morality on me? And they don't understand, well, wait a minute, you are inflicting your morality on me. So whose wins out? Whose morality gets to be at the top and whose has to go bye-bye? That's the problem. No one even thinks about that. It's a selfish attitude. It's I get what I want. That's everyone's attitude. And what I want is being influenced by pop culture. I want equality for all, except equality means accepting homosexuality at the expense of Christianity, at the expense of your conscience. You don't get to have that conscience. You don't get to make a decision on how to run your own business if it conflicts with my idea of morality. That's a problem. Not only is this in our media, it has now affected businesses. You may have heard of Mystery's Pizza. Check out this article. ABC 57, RFRA, first Michiana business to publicly deny same-sex service. Now, what's interesting about this article right here is that if you go ahead and read it, you'll find that they didn't publicly deny same-sex service. They never denied same-sex service. They didn't. It was all theoretical. What happened in this situation was an ABC 57 reporter went to this business and started asking questions. Well, what do you think about this law? Do you agree with this law? They started probing for answers, and what this business said was that they liked the law. They agreed with it. And when asked if they would cater a wedding, they said no. And the next thing you know, they've got a headline that they are the first business to deny same-sex service. What was the result? Threats. Death threats. Lots of threats. Their business closed. They were forced to shut down. Why? Because the media went and took a non-story, turned it into a story, and the business was then the victim. They were shut down all because a reporter wanted to go there, ask some questions, and then twist the headline, as if they had already done it. If you've seen anything since then, you've seen the interviews, they have said they would not deny service to a same-sex person. What they would not do is cater their wedding. It's exactly what I just said a few minutes ago. It's not about who you're attracted to. It's not about who you're in love with. It's about what you're doing. And they're saying, I will still serve any person regardless of who they are attracted to. Because maybe that is inherent to who they are, and we're not going to discriminate against who they are. But it's what they do that we have a problem with. None of that mattered. People went nuts. They issued death threats. One teacher in Indiana asked, who's coming with me? Let's go burn it down. People threatening to steal their money, do all sorts of stuff. It's just awful. Pop culture, public opinion, just shut down a business. Pop culture, public opinion has just created this channel of how people think. We want you to think this way. And now so many people are thinking that. It's very sad. It's very sad. I encourage people to start using their brains. Look at the headlines, read the articles, find out if they're matching up. Think honestly and openly about the issues. Because I wonder how many people who are spewing all this hatred over Facebook and over Twitter and on all the public media or social media, I wonder if these people actually stop and think, I wonder, is the Christian really purposefully trying to discriminate? I don't know any that are. Don't know any. Nobody wants to discriminate. That's not what anyone's looking for. But are people really understanding that? Are they thinking about that? This is Luke429. I'm Michael Summers. Have a great day.